Today, I am very excited to welcome Russ Lorber to the show. Russ is the founder and owner of Wide Roots LLC, a US-based wine import and distribution company dedicated to bringing small and family-owned Italian wineries to American consumers. In this episode, our three key takeaways are: number one, what exactly is DC Metro? Second is the importance of agility. And then number three, topic of the day, tariffs.
Welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Barbara Fitzgerald. In this show, we'll break down the complexities of selling wine in the US by discussing the relevant issues of today with experts from around the globe. Each episode serves up three key insights to help elevate your winery's presence in the US market. So grab a pen and paper and let's pave the way for your success in the US.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Masterclass US Wine Market. Today, I am very excited to welcome Russ Lorber to the show. Russ is the founder and owner of Wide Roots LLC, a US-based wine import and distribution company dedicated to bringing small and family-owned Italian wineries to American consumers. After a successful career in corporate finance and operations, Russ turned to his passion for wine and a deep appreciation for Italian culture and brought this into his mission-driven business. So through Wide Roots, he focuses on authentic storytelling, sustainable production, and building long-term partnerships that celebrate regional diversity and heritage. And alongside all of these wonderful things, Russ is also a fellow certified Italian wine ambassador with Vinitaly International. So we're really, really lucky and excited to have you here, Russ. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here, and thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we dive into our discussion today, can you tell us a little bit more, Russ, about your background and how you came to work in the wine business?
Definitely. So I came into the wine business with a little bit of a different background. I was in the corporate world for 25 years, and that had kind of run its course, and my goals had changed. I think at some point, probably close to the end of that 25 years, and decided that it was time to strike out on my own and do something that I really had a passion for and an interest in doing. And, it was kind of like reaching that point where I wasn't going to retire at age 55 anymore. And so I might as well do the work that I can wake up every morning and feel passionate about. And so when I thought long and hard about this, what I would do, and I had this discovery probably 12 years or so ago that I had this passion for European wines and particularly Italian wines, and found it to be something that wasn't necessarily accessible to all of my friends for one reason or another, but it was something that I just had a really good time kind of geeking out in retail stores and on wine lists looking for new things.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the thing that really flipped my switch with Italian wine was the first time I tasted Ripasso from Valpolicella. And prior to that, wine was very homogenous to me. And as I started exploring Italian wine, it really opened up a lot of possibilities for me about how many different flavor profiles were out there and how many interesting things were out there that were affordable and accessible to consumers if only we knew what we were looking at when we were walking down that aisle. And so I made it my mission to try to help people discover those wines the same way that I discovered them. And I also had the benefit of wine tourism and visiting wineries throughout Europe. And what really struck me in those experiences was the passion that winemakers showed, and at the same time, the generosity that they exhibited in sharing those passions with me. And I thought that's the experience that I really wanted to have. And so it's my goal and my objective to bring those experiences to our customers and also consumers that we ultimately reach through our customers, and helping turn them on to the experiences that they can have with Italian wine. And so that's what got me to where I am here.
That's amazing. I love that so much because maybe we're biased being that we love wine so much, but I really think that's one of the things that makes it so special is like it is about camaraderie in so many broader senses, and the world needs camaraderie right now. So,
Definitely, for sure. Yes. I mean, and honestly, I think when, people ask me about the name of our company, Wide Roots, and where that came from is ultimately at the end of the day, no matter where you're from, no matter what part of the world you're from, and I've had the great privilege to travel to a lot of parts of the world, but no matter what part of the world that you're from, and it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is or wherever you come from, at the end of the day, we like to be with our friends and our family, and we like to celebrate. And wine is something that can facilitate that. And so it's kind of like at the core of our message around everything. It's about celebrating, just being with each other and, being able to have a good time together, because we all, we work hard, but that's not the end all be all. It's really about that, that shared experience with one another of just like being able to relax and enjoy a glass together.
yeah. Oh, well, speaking of enjoying glasses together, you and I spent a pretty amazing week together on a press tour of Etna, which we spoke just before we started recording how special that was. But I think that allows me to really say firsthand, how you're known for your thoughtfulness, your consumer-friendly approach to demystifying Italian wines in the US market, and specifically in and around Washington, D.C., which is exactly what we're here to talk about today. So in this episode, our three key takeaways and what we're really excited to learn from us are, number one, what exactly is DC Metro? So the DC area is actually three distinct markets. You have Washington, DC, and then suburban Maryland and Northern Virginia, which each present very distinct consumer profiles, buying patterns, price sensitivities. So we'll kind of dig through what all of that means, that kind of hyper local understanding. Second is the importance of agility. So we talk about it all the time, shifting consumer preferences, distributor consolidation, supply chain unpredictability. Wholesalers today really have to be able to move quickly and strategically. And we'll talk a little bit about how your company is navigating this evolving landscape. And then number three, topic of the day, tariffs. So how do tariffs really demand partnership, not panic? So with this ongoing uncertainty around the tariffs, we need some stronger importer-supplier relationships. Okay.
Definitely. So yeah, excited to talk about
Yeah.
all of that. So
All right.
yeah,
Well, let's dig into kind of the basics first. Let's unpack the geographic and demographic differences across DC, Maryland, and Virginia. It's a very dynamic metro area. So, can you explain a little bit, what is like DC proper, suburban Maryland, Northern Virginia? What are the things that are similar? What are the things that are different, especially obviously when it comes to selling Italian wine?
definitely. I'll give you an overview of the area and also maybe infer a little bit about what it could mean for the rest of the US as well. But for Wide Roots, ground zero is DC and Maryland and then Virginia to an extent as well. And so I'll start in DC, and actually even before I get into that, like I think a lot of people getting into the US think of the good markets being New York, Florida, California, Chicago. DC is a really exciting market, and I would say it's been up and coming for a while. You've got a really good sommelier network in DC, which I think fuels that, and the restaurant scene in DC. I mean, I've lived in this area now for 25 years, and I will say that the restaurant scene in particular has come a really long way. And so you have disposable income, you have people that are interested in culture and good experiences. And so and DC has really evolved for that. And so as I mentioned earlier, it's very sommelier driven. And you think, Barbara, about like our Italian wine ambassador curriculum, and like we just put out Italian Wine Unplugged about a year ago, which I think is an awesome resource for Italian wine. But thinking about the producers who are benchmark producers of like different grapes in different regions. And in the DC community, you have a real appreciation for that. You have people that are seeking out those benchmark producers, and then getting into even a higher level than that are like what we call allocated wines here in the US. And so you may have a producer in Italy who makes a very small volume of product, and they only have so many bottles to go around, and those bottles are very limited in availability, and they tend to be a little more expensive, and those are very highly sought after in the sommelier community. And so sommeliers are looking for those benchmark producers. And then besides that, you also have a curiosity of all, and I think people listening to this podcast have an appreciation of how much diversity there is in Italian wine, how many different grapes there are in different regions. And there's really a grape and a growing location for pretty much any situation that we're in. And you have a lot of restaurants who are doing their best to come up with a wine list to cultivate something that can kind of appeal to every one of those situations. And so the wine list, they can be very adventurous in that respect. But at the same time, again, they're looking for, sort of their benchmark Brunellos, and they're looking for their benchmark Barolos, and they're looking to get their hands on some of those really hard to get producers that are known to make amazing examples of those particular terroirs.
Would you say that DC is the kind of demand there is driven by the fact that there's a lot of also foreign, especially foreign dignitaries, like people that have already maybe more experience with Italian wine, those benchmark producers, and maybe even some of the diversity that many other American consumers might not be aware of?
Definitely. You have a global customer clientele that are going to the restaurants, and you also have even the domestic clientele. You have people that are willing to spend a lot of money on a bottle of wine. I mean, if I think about myself, if I can find a $15 bottle at retail, bottle of wine, I feel like I've scored a great victory. But
Yeah.
when you have people that go to restaurants and they think nothing of spending $500 on a bottle of wine on a wine list in a restaurant, there's just a lot more disposable income there. And this
Yeah.
is not a judgment, obviously, on any of that and like what people like or don't like, because you can find great quality, I think, at every price point. But I think just the point of that is that in DC, you're more likely to find the people that are willing to spend a lot of money on a bottle, and a good bottle.
All right.
And to your point, that are, it's a little bit more of a global audience, and maybe people who are a little bit more plugged into what can come out of the region.
Right.
And then, you go up the road to Baltimore. Baltimore is about, on a good day, it's a 45-minute drive, and then figure in traffic and all bets are off. Baltimore's a little bit different. Baltimore's a little bit more of kind of like a collection of neighborhoods, but you've got great educational institutions like Johns Hopkins. You've got kind of an educated population, and they may be less aware of everything coming out, but what you find in Baltimore is that you can come up with a wine list that covers an eclectic amount of territory, and you can have different grape varieties from different regions of Italy that are really interesting. What it really comes down to is the quality that those wines deliver at the price, and our own experience with wide roots. And I'll kind of hold up an example. We carry a Spumante Pecorino from Le Marche, and I remember making the decision to carry that wine. And I thought, like, we were looking for a Prosecco at that time. And we happened to have this sample from a producer that we were looking to work with. And we kind of like tasted this wine, and we're like, we got to bring this in. Like, it's just so good for what it is. And we weren't quite sure if we could sell it. But, we moved several pallets a year of a Spumante Pecorino in Baltimore. And it's just like, if you're at the right price point, if you've got the right quality and you're at the right price point, and by the right price point, I'm going to say that $15 to $20 retail price on the shelf in a retail store here in the US, that you can move some volume in Maryland in the Baltimore market by giving that product love through featuring it in dinners and featuring it in consumer tastings. And people are open to trying new things, and kind of like take it back to maybe first principles for American wine drinkers. As American wine consumers, or at least I'm speaking from my own experience, we're taught to think about wine based on like the Crayola 8-pack of grapes, which would be Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Riesling, so Cabernet Franc.
Yeah.
You get the
Yeah. The
idea
big
there.
boys.
Right. And there's so much more out there, right? But at the same time, like not everything needs to be from those particular grapes or those particular profiles. What's really important and what really matters is finding good quality that can outdrink its price. And I think that's really one of the advantages of Italian wine. It's a little bit less discovered, and there's still so many more things out there that if we just take the time through a good quality distribution partner and then good quality retail and restaurant partners, we can bring those to the world very successfully. I've seen it with my own eyes.
Yeah.
And then, you go to, and then Northern Virginia is another part of this region. And you think of the US market, like you see different clusters all over the US. And a lot of that happens to correspond with geography. And so if you are operating as a wholesaler, which my company Wide Roots does, it makes sense from, the standpoint of economies of scale that you service a cluster of markets in a particular area. And we could probably get into a lot with this about how every market and every US state is different from a regulatory standpoint. But I'll kind of boil it down and just say, if you're in the Maryland, DC area, it probably makes sense to be in the Virginia area at some point, because again, you're looking to build your business to some kind of critical mass that has economies of scale. And so Virginia is a little bit different from a regulatory standpoint because it's what we call a franchise state, where you assign a wine brand to a distributor and that gets registered with the state, and it becomes very difficult to change that once it's done. And the implication of that from a producer is that they have to be very careful about who they partner with if they go into a state like Virginia, because, and I've seen this, I've experienced it, unfortunately, with a couple of producers that I've worked with, where you get into a relationship with a partner who maybe doesn't do the best job of representing you, and then you're stuck with that partner because they will not let you go. And unfortunately, the law is on their side. But long story short, the selection in a place like Virginia tends to be maybe a little bit lower than what you would get in DC or Maryland. But there are some good opportunities there. Like if you're building a good brand in DC, then you have a lot of people who are working in the district who maybe live in Northern Virginia, and they're going to be looking for those brands in Northern Virginia. And really, the moral of the story, I think, if I'm thinking of it from a producer who would want to be in this particular part of the US, is if you're looking at Virginia, you probably want to look at the three states together and go with a producer that you think could best represent you in those three areas. Because particularly if you go to Virginia, you could get stuck in a bad situation potentially,
Yeah.
that would be really difficult to extract yourself from.
And that's really good practical advice. And just because, we are American, so we understand it very well. But for those who aren't, can you explain, like, is DC, do you need your own wholesaler in DC? Does it get lumped into your Maryland wholesaler? How does that work since it's technically not a state?
Yeah, so DC is a little bit of we kind of refer to it as the wild, wild west of the wine scene. And so typically in a US state, you know, producers assign rights to an importer, and then an importer assigns rights to a wholesaler. And Wide Roots functions as an importer and a wholesaler, and you can assign rights to certain states, and you can assign rights to other states to other people. DC is a bit of an odd thing because it's not really clear that you can really assign one single distributor or importer to DC. And it seems like if they just pay the excise tax, that there is, you can sell your wine there. But then if somebody represents you in Virginia, there's also this sort of kind of section of the law that says if I represent you in Virginia, then I have to represent you in DC, and you can't
Mm.
sell under. And so there's a little bit of, it's a little bit foggy, to be honest. But I think, at the end of the day, and I don't want to get too much into interpreting the legalities of this for many, many reasons. But the long story short is that if you go, like, Maryland does not have the same laws as Virginia. And if you go into a state like Virginia and you have somebody represent you there and in DC, you want to be very sure that that's going to be a good relationship in order to not get into a situation where somebody else is selling you in DC and then all of a sudden, there's some kind of a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so again, great advice. Thank you for that. To kind of summarize what you said about the different markets, it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you're saying that DC is the more almost traditional market in a sense. They're looking for brands that have a lot of legacy, a lot of kind of reach already in the market. And then Baltimore is really this more kind of experimental, maybe a place for an up and coming region. So it seems like, maybe DC is like the best place for DOC, DOCG, and like some great, maybe newer DOCs or even IGTs in Baltimore, broadly speaking.
Yeah, I would say that's a good way to look at it. I mean, if I could add anything to that, we get the chance to work a lot with winemakers in our market. And I think DC, calling DC kind of like a traditional market, maybe comparing it to like a New York City,
Hmm.
for example, it's definitely kind of getting to that point. Whereas in Baltimore, I think there's more like the winemakers that come to visit us here in Maryland and go to Baltimore, I will say leave very impressed with, like, walking through a store or looking at a wine list, seeing the selection that is available to customers here in Maryland. And that's not like, it's like you don't have selection like that without having people that will buy wines that are eclectic and different and
Hmm.
kind of across a lot of different categories. You have that because consumers are willing to taste new things, and you have store owners and you have sommeliers who, if the wine is good and the quality is good for the price, they're going to push it because at the end of the day, that'll be profitable for them. And they don't mind taking that time to educate somebody about something that is not Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc or something that we're kind of typically accustomed to here in the US as we grow up in the wine scene.
Well, thank you for making that distinction. Let's talk a little bit now about kind of the importance of agility. So, we'll explore how your business has really had to adapt to shifting consumer behavior, supply chain complexity. We'll get to tariffs in a moment. For now, we can just talk about these kind of other challenges that we've faced in the industry in the past few years. So, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in buyer behavior over the past few years? And that could be on premise, off premise, even private clients if you work with private clients.
Yeah, I think one of the really positive things, and I didn't mention earlier, I work with Vinny DePino. He works with Wide Roots, and he's now a part owner in the company. And he and I
Fantastic.
talked as well before. I think he was in your cohort, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, he was.
So yeah, and so he and I talked about this a little bit earlier today, and he made a really good point, and that's the restaurant scene in Baltimore has been evolving, and the selection that you have has really been the quality of the restaurants, what you get, the authenticity is really evolving into something very special. And it's very exciting because I think it opens opportunities for what we do. And it's like, I think Baltimore traditionally was known for its Little Italy area, which traditionally was an area where we had a lot of Italian immigrants, especially from Campania and Sicily, who settled here in Baltimore. And the Little Italy neighborhood of Baltimore is kind of where they settled. And like, I don't want to get into pure Italian culture versus Italian American culture, because there's always that back and forth. But in the sort of the tendency to say, okay, that's not real Italian. Well, whatever. First of all, it's all coming a long way. It's all evolving into something that is like, more people travel to Italy, they understand sort of the authenticity part of it. So you're seeing kind of an increase in that authenticity in the restaurant scene here. And along with it, you're also seeing an increase in selection. And so it's opening up opportunities. And I would say, like, if you drive an hour up the road to Frederick, Maryland, Frederick is maybe where Baltimore was 15 years ago, but they're evolving as a restaurant scene, and they have a lot of people who live there that have money to spend. And so that restaurant scene is evolving. Their wine selection is evolving. And I think that's a good lesson, is to think about, like, and this is happening. It's not just Maryland, DC, and Virginia. It's really everywhere. It's like, Vinny described this really well when I talked with him earlier, but like, who's buying a Neapolitan pizza oven and putting a pizzeria in where they're making an authentic Napolitano pizza, and they're probably putting together a wine list that complements that has some authenticity to it, that really brings Italian culture in. And so I think, in terms of being agile, like, the first thing I'll say is, like, be kind of cognizant of the trends and where areas are going and get ahead of it. I think that's probably the single biggest thing that we can do. The other kind of broad one that I'll say is just like kind of the general state of the economy. Is we're clearly in a situation today where there's some market softness that we're feeling, and it's at least how we've been feeling it here. And I can't speak for everybody that's in the business, but I would say, at least to the beginning of the year, is that the market has been relatively soft as the economy has become uncertain. And so there's been more of a shift to value-based brands. And so, we have to make sure that we're not stuck with a whole lot of inventory of maybe the mid-tier and higher priced products, and that we're prepared to go out and really push things that are maybe more value driven. And then you go to a place like DC, and people are still spending money in DC. And so we can continue to push the higher priced products there, but then, be conscious of value everywhere else. And so I think, the agility that you speak of is just kind of like understanding your current situation and what your opportunities are, and then like how you can kind of position yourself to take advantage of those no matter what the situation is.
Yeah, and you are really lucky in that sense, even if it's complicated to have three markets all right there, but you're lucky to be able to diversify in that way. So you're not, if you've already brought in, I'll just say the name, Sassicaia. I know you don't bring them in, but if you brought them in, you're not just sitting on it because you're only working with a market that's shifting to kind of, the price to value wine, the lower price to value wines. You still have the opportunity to move that. So also good to think, for wineries looking to partner with you, that means that you kind of take on less risk and more attractive to them.
Right. And we haven't gotten into the tariffs yet. And I know there's been kind of like, I've at least heard a little bit about people kind of stocking up before tariffs hit. And, we may pay the price for this at some point. Who knows? But we've been kind of careful about that too, because we're in this situation where we're going to get hit with tariffs, but we also, it's hard to see where the market is going to go. And so you don't like, I think there's a previous podcast episode that you did, and I can't remember who you interviewed, but I listened to it and I remember it really resonating with me, is that we really have to be careful about cash flow.
Yes. That was Harmon Skurnick who said that.
It was Harmon Skurnick. That's exactly who it was. Yes, I remember that. And I was like, right on. But we have to be really careful about taking big risks with inventory at the moment, especially when you have the prospect of tariffs hitting you that we have to pay upon customs clearance here in the US. So there's a big cash flow risk that we get into. And I think that's, you're kind of, I don't know, probably pulling us ahead a little bit, but
No, that's okay.
you hit the nail right on the head with the tariffs. It's like, don't panic. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the worst thing you can do in this situation is panic and then pull the trigger on something, and then you get hit with a tariff on top of it, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden there's all this, you're out all this cash.
Yeah. Well, I would just want to ask you this one quick question, and then we will shift to the tariffs because it is, like I said, the topic du jour. But how are you using tools like sales feedback, market trend reports, other data to inform how you're curating and positioning your portfolio?
We definitely look at data. I mean, I look at reorder points all the time for products that we currently carry. Mainly, I would say the problem that we have had with Wide Roots being a relatively younger company is that we have probably erred on the side of being leaner. And
Mm.
so as a result, we've had situations where we need to bring more product in and we need to reorder at different times. And so, we look at our reorder points, especially on products that we're featuring by the glass, so that we make sure that we're not running out of products. But beyond that, we constantly look at what our top products are. We look at products that we think we should be doing better with, and we will do some experimentation with price points until we
Mm.
find a price point where if something is not moving, can we move it at a different price? And then, in that case, we have decisions to make about whether that's can we make the right amount of profit on that product at that price? And
Right.
so, like every time we decide to source a product and we decide to distribute a product, we do it because we like the product a lot. We think there's an opportunity for it. We think we can do something with it. And I would say probably 80% of the cases we do about what we expect, or we do maybe better than we would expect. And then there's 20% where we say we're not moving the volume, and we either need to look at price or we need to look at the fitness for the market, and then we make a decision at that point as to whether we should continue to carry that product. So we definitely look at sales data at least on a monthly basis across all of our products and assess where we are with those. And if something is not working for us, we try to be pretty quick in moving it out of the
Mhm.
portfolio. And the other thing is just that's very important is just being very transparent with the producer about, okay, this isn't something that we think will work in our market.
Mhm.
And like, I'll give you kind of a specific example of this with a tough category, not just our market here, but across markets in the US, is the rosé
Yeah.
category. And look, personally, I love rosé. I think it's awesome. And it's a funny category with consumers.
Yeah.
And the reality is, at least here, I mean, Florida's a little different because Florida, it's warm all the time.
Yeah.
But here you've got about 5 months to sell rosé. And so it turns into kind of a supply chain, something that you have to really get good at managing how much you bring in relative to how much you sell and how much you push.
Yeah.
And so, and then in the other cases, you find things that just won't work because people expect a certain profile of rosé. And so I think, kind of getting back to your point, analytics and data, the biggest thing that we look is sales data. And
Yeah.
then, kind of take that back to what decisions do we have to make with each product.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, we will shift now to the tariffs. So we've already got into it a little bit. So you were saying that, it's a strategy to kind of buy a lot in advance, but that there's a lot of risk involved with that too. So I'm assuming that you didn't use that strategy to buy up in advance. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
that's accurate. We did not do that. We did our buying as we normally would, buying
Mm.
in quantities that we thought could essentially cover us until we needed to place our next order. So,
Yeah.
and there's a few reasons for that. One is that, our warehousing, we pay by the pallet, so I would have to pay for a lot of warehousing of product. And
Right.
then the other is essentially the risk that you take, especially when you get into something like a white wine. And so you had the interview with Harman Skurnick. He really said this best. It was kind of like the advice that he gave is don't really do much different from what you've been doing. And we did not. I mean, you can do those things, but then you need to have the capital to put that into inventory. And if you do that, you're taking capital away that could help you in a situation down the road. And so it's a decision that you have to make. Now, obviously, the downside for us is that eventually we get hit with these tariffs. But honestly, that's a reality I'd rather kind of step up to sooner rather than later. And if a tariff pushes the price point of something into a region that it can't be supported, we would rather find that out sooner rather than later. And
Right.
so, it's being a small business, we don't have a lot of capital to kind of put out there to take a big risk. And it's like, I don't know, there's a saying, I think in tech, it's like fail fast or something like that. And so
Yeah.
if something is going to go wrong, you want to find out sooner rather than later. And the
Yeah.
other thing, and honestly, this is risky as well. And I think other speakers on your podcast have alluded to this as well, but it's just so uncertain. It's really difficult to make a plan right now
Yeah.
because we don't know where it's going to go. Tomorrow we could wake up and it could be 30% in 60 days. And like, we just don't know that, or it could be zero. And so unless I think, you own a business and you're kind of making these decisions where the uncertainty makes it really difficult to kind of figure out, like, at the end of the day, capital is very limited.
Mm.
Cash is limited, right? I don't have an infinite pool of cash that I can go out and just build inventory if I want. And so I'm making decisions every day based on the cash that I have, the capital that I have. And when you have a smaller business, it's even like when you're running Breakthrough or Southern or RNDC and you've got a war chest, it's a little bit different. When you're kind of in
Yeah.
the situation of a small business, every day you're thinking about what's my best use of the cash that I have and the capital that I have. And, you just really makes it difficult. So uncertainty is not our friend right now. And I
Yeah. It's
think, to that point, it's kind of like, how do you best cope with it? The best thing, and maybe this is like mental health as much as anything, but it's just like, don't panic, don't go out and do something rash, because I don't know that it'll fix anything in the long run.
Yeah. And hopefully, the panic seemed to really be induced by threat of 200%. And there's no level of tariffs that is going to benefit your business, right? But hopefully, like the notion that that seems to be off the table now helps people to not panic as much. That panic after 200% was very justified. But,
Yeah.
along those lines, what kind of conversations are you having with your producers around, shared risk or pricing strategy?
Yeah. And so, we have a few producers that are in a position to work with us on that. And so we've gotten some concessions, and we've gotten some pricing concessions, and we've gotten some direct help with paying tariffs. And that's really producer by producer. Some producers are kind of more in a position where they can do that, and
Yeah.
others are in less of a position. And I pretty much everybody that I work with directly at this point, I kind of know who has money and who doesn't. But
But
so
like you said, they have to protect their cash flow too. There's like
exactly.
no part of the value chain that is a very cash heavy business. So everyone has to really, this is capital intensive.
No, that's right. And like, look, my goal is not to go and gut the producers that we work with, because that's not going to form. I mean, our goal is to have long-term partnerships.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, what can we all afford at this? And so if somebody isn't able to help with something, maybe they put it all on the line giving me pricing because they really wanted to send their product to me here in the US, and I can't ask them for any more concessions. But then, we have to let the market decide at that point.
Yeah.
We have to kind of push things through and then see, can we keep moving the volume that we're moving? And it sort of becomes that conversation, which is maybe, it's a little bit kind of a harsh reality. at some point, but then you hope that the quality can kind of provide the reason to keep going with it. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it sort of becomes a producer by producer thing. But I think, to your original question, we've had some people that are trying to help with this. We don't know how permanent things are going to be. I mean, I'd love to sit here and tell you that in 4 years we'll just unwind all of this. And the answer is I
Yeah.
just really don't know. And I don't think anybody on this side of the ocean or on Italy's side of the ocean can really sit here and make a decision as though that will happen at this point, because we really
Right.
don't know. You could have a different government come in, and then all of a sudden we've been, making money from these tariffs, if you will, and somebody decides they don't really want to unwind that, and then we're just
Yeah.
stuck with it. So I don't know. The optimist in me says I hope it all goes away, but I just don't know at this point.
Yeah, it's really, I think even just, the past elections in the US tell you like there is no predicting. You don't know what the outcome of something is going to be. So the best we can do is kind of what you said is just have the conversations. Remember that your importers, your distributors are your partners and they want to see you succeed, especially a small company like you and Wide Roots. You've chosen these brands because you believe in them. And so
That's
you want to see them succeed in the market.
That's right. Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, if they're in our book, it's because we love them, and
Yeah.
we feel there's an opportunity. And now we're kind of going through this dislocation, and I hope we make it through it. I don't know that we will in every case, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're going to find out here in the coming months.
Whew. Well, it's kind of heavy, but
Yeah, right.
sadly,
It's
sadly,
very
yeah.
heavy. It's yeah,
Uh,
waking up at 3 a.m. and lying awake
yeah.
for hours is kind
Yeah,
of
exactly. But
so,
I hope it I've told this story previously on here, but when I was at Vinitaly, I heard an Italian person say, this is what the American people want because they voted for Donald Trump. And I just think it's so important to remind, our global partners, this is not what we want. We are so supportive of the beautiful, influx of wines from around the world and having partners in these global markets, Italy especially, being that this conversation is between me and you, but
yeah, so I've heard that as well, that like this is what the American people wanted. And sitting here in the US, trust me, I can tell you that like a lot of us here are kind of thinking the same thing. Like ultimately, is this kind of what we voted for? And I'm not sure if it is or if it isn't. But at this, like, I guess regardless of all of that, there are people like us that continue to believe in this category. And we see the beauty of Italy. We see the beauty of traveling to Italy and the culture and the experience. And that's what we try to bring through the wine. I mean, we don't just sell wine, right? We
right.
sell Italian culture. I feel like Vinny and I are the boots on the ground for the families that we represent. Like we are like their presence here in the US. And
Yeah.
we work with producers that we work with directly, and we have others that we buy through other importers stateside. And regardless, like we try to get to know all of them. We've been to a lot of their estates. We've had them here in the US, and we see their faces every time we pour their wines. We can hear their voices, and like we represent people, we represent culture and tradition. And like the optimist in me says that will outlast all of what is happening today. And I don't know I don't know
Mm.
how it's going to go, but somehow there's an optimist in me that says we're going to get through all of that, because this is just too beautiful to not kind of make it, if you will. So
Oh,
yeah.
that's like for me, that's the quote of the episode. We're gonna survive because this is too beautiful to not make it. I love that. Well, Russ, you've been so generous with all of your time and your insider expertise. So, as we start to wind things down, we do our rapid fire quiz here where we ask our guests 3 questions to help our listeners better understand the US wine market and specifically this episode. So, just answer in a couple sentences if you can. Number one, what is your number one insight for mastering the DC metro market?
Ah, you got. I thought you were going to say the. I thought you were going to say the
Okay,
U.S. market.
we can go US, wider
No,
US.
it's okay. It's okay. If you want to do DC, regardless, I would say if you're trying to master the U.S. market or the DC metro market, is to recognize that it's not a monolith. Every market has its own groups and segments that you can really cater to and kind of understand where you are. You don't necessarily have to sell in New York or Miami or Chicago or DC. Maybe there's an opening for you here in Baltimore, or maybe there's an opening in a place like Atlanta. Like, what's really the best fit for your products, your price point, and the value that you bring, and then find the partner that can help you to reach that. I think that's probably the most critical learning that I've had.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So again, this is a partnership. So you have to find your partner in that market.
Yeah.
All right. Number two, what is something you would have told your younger professional self about selling wine in the US?
So we partner with Charles Lazara from Volio Imports. He had a really good one a year ago, which was, he was asked this question. His answer was focus. And I thought that was a really good answer. I'll give you my answer. And my answer is promise what you can deliver and under promise, over deliver. Like, always just be able to come through on what you say you can do in any situation, because our credibility is the single biggest asset that we have as people. And that is the best way that we can enhance that reputation of credibility.
Yeah, it's so beautiful and so important with building trust with your customers too. Even, if your customers are restaurants or retailers, that credibility is what builds that trust.
For sure.
Okay, and last, we move around a lot in the wine industry. So what is your favorite travel hack when doing market work?
Well, I'm going to give my favorite travel hack in reverse.
Okay.
Which is flying from west. Sorry,
No.
I'm backwards. That's just par for the course. So I'm flying from west to east is, don't necessarily worry. Like, I talk to a lot of people that want to book a direct flight to their final destination in Europe. Don't be afraid of the connection in Europe. Book your flight to Europe and then make your connection and go. And the reason is, it's so much easier to sleep on that connection than it is on the transatlantic flight. And then you get to where you're going, you feel good, you're not overly groggy, you're ready to go, and then you fall asleep at the right time that night.
Okay, that's a good, figuring out how to reorganize your sleep pattern when you're traveling is like clutch. The older we get, the more I'm like, everything's about my sleep.
For sure. And everything's backwards for me. Like, when I was younger, I had very little problem going east to west. Now my bigger problems are coming back to the US, and it takes me like a week to adjust back. But for some reason, going to Europe, I'm fine. It was always the opposite.
Yeah. Well, Russ, thank you so much, really, for joining us today on Masterclass US Wine Market, giving us all these incredible insights into DC, Baltimore, or Maryland, and Virginia. How can our listeners connect with you?
The best way is on Instagram. You can find us at Wide Roots LLC. It's wide_roots LLC. We also have a Facebook page, Wide Roots. And then we are on LinkedIn at Wide Roots LLC. You can also email me at Russ, RUSS, at widerootsllc.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again. Give our best also to Vinny, your incredible partner. And I really hope we get to see each other soon.
That would be great. I'd love that. I definitely
Cheers.
will.
Take
Cheers.
care.
Salute.
Salute.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Masterclass US Wine Market. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date with the latest industry trends, remember to like, follow, and share our podcast. And if you find value in our conversations, please leave us a review to help others discover the show and grow our community. Stay tuned for new episodes every Monday. Until then, brindiamo il vostro successo.